What's up YouTube, I'm EVScape and welcome back to another video. Now, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow got a buff. Instead of now giving a 10% accuracy and damage boost, it gives a 30% accuracy and damage boost, which is a massive step up, and everyone can't stop talking about how amazing this weapon is at dragons. I've seen a whole bunch of videos of people going to different dragons and doing 1 hour of dragons, 2 hours of dragons, and I just thought, why would you go and test out 1 hour? There's a lot of RNG involved. Why don't we just do the math on it? We save ourselves a lot of time and we can figure out whether or not it is the correct thing to use in any given situation. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, there is a DPS calculator online. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description, as well as the guy's Twitter. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's like Bitter Koji or something. Basically, he made a spreadsheet where you can just type in the gear that you use, the monster you're fighting, and it will tell you how much damage per second you're going to do, because we know how the combat system works in old school RuneScape. It's very easy to figure out what weapon we're supposed to be using in what situation and what gear setup. So essentially today we're going to go around to all of the different dragons in the game and figure out whether or not the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is now best in slot over the blowpipe or the twisted bow. Let's get to it. So the first place I wanted to check out was the green dragons, the lowest level dragon if you don't include the baby ones. Now, against this dragon, if you're using your Elite Void setup, because I imagine you wouldn't want to take your Armadillo out into the wilderness, along with your Necklace of Anguish, your Dragon Hunter Crossbow, your Twisted Buckler, and an Archer's Ring, I went with the Snakeskin Boots because we don't want to take an extra item into the wilderness, because the wilderness is the only place you can kill green dragons. If you're using that setup with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow against green dragons, you're going to have a 7.08 damage per second. Comparing that to the blowpipe with the same setup, you're going to have an 8.09 damage per second. So even after the extra 20% buff, the toxic blowpipe is definitely best at green dragons. Keeping in mind, this is using adamant darts. If we were to swap the darts down to mithril, we're only going to be getting a 7.7 damage per second, which is still substantially better, 10% in fact better than the Dragon Hunter Crossbow at the green dragons. Next stop is the blue dragons. Obviously we're going to go up the list. Now at the blue dragons we don't have to worry about taking extra risk because we're not in the wilderness. We don't have to worry about losing things, so we can just take a full maxed setup. However, the Void outfit, the Elite Void outfit, is still better than Armadillo for both the Dragon Hunter Crossbow and the blowpipe. But now we can add in our Pegasian boots as well. Using the Dragon Hunter Crossbow against the blue dragons, you're going to have a 6.5 damage per second, and using the toxic blowpipe, you're going to have a 6.8 damage per second using adamant darts. However, if we were to switch out to the mithril darts, you're going to have a 6.5 damage per second, which would make the Dragon Hunter Crossbow slightly better. That being said, I think most people are going to use adamant darts in their blowpipe, but if you were to use mithril, you would be better off going with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow at blue dragons. The next dragon on the list is naturally red dragons. Now against the red dragons, the Void is still best in slot for both of the weapons. However, this time, if you're using the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, you're going to get a 6.16 damage per second, and using the blowpipe, you're going to get a 5.93 damage per second using addy darts. So in this case, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow would be better. However, here's where things get interesting. If you're using the blowpipe with ranging potion and rigor activated, you're fully potted up and you're using rigor, you're going to have a 9.2 damage per second, whereas with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, you're only going to have a 9 even. Which means if you're potted up and using your prayers, the blowpipe is still better at the red dragons. However, if you're just going to be AFKing and you don't want to have to focus on keeping your prayer points up and staying range potted, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is going to be better at the reds. Lastly on the list of chromatic dragons, we have the black dragons. Now, against the black dragons, the best in slot for the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is in fact the Void setup. However, the best in slot for the Blowpipe setup is actually Armadillo. It's going to give you an increased accuracy. That being said, the best in slot against Black Dragons is the Dragon Hunter Crossbow with a 5.34 damage per second versus the Blowpipe, which has a 4.66. And even if we go ahead and pot up and activate Rigor, we still get an 8.16 damage per second with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, and we get a 7.5 damage per second with the Toxic Blowpipe. So as we can see, a pattern is emerging here, guys. The higher the defense of the monster, the better off you're going to be using the Dragon Hunter Crossbow. Let's go ahead and move on to the Brutal Dragons. Alright, first on the Brutal Dragon list are the Brutal Green Dragons. Now, as you can see on screen now, on the left side is the Dragon Hunter Crossbow. Best in slot for the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is the Void setup, and it's going to give you a 5.7 damage per second. And on the other side, we have the Blowpipe setup. The best in slot for the Blowpipe is the Armadillo setup, and that's going to give you a 5.2. So as you can see, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is best in slot here, and even if we chuck on a Ranging Potion and Rigor, it's still going to be best in slot by a pretty substantial margin. However, it does close the gap a little bit. I think from here on out, we're going to be seeing that the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is best in slot for all of the Brutal Dragons, but let's test it out just in case. Alright, next up we got the Brutal Blue Dragons. Now here, once again, the Void setup is best for the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, and the Armadillo setup is best for the Blowpipe. Now with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, you're going to get a 5.3 damage per second, and with the Blowpipe, you're going to get a 4.7 damage per second, making the Dragon Hunter Crossbow the best thing to use for Brutal Blues. And then if we go ahead and pot up and use Rigor again, the best thing to use is the Dragon Hunter Crossbow still with an 8.19, and the Blowpipe has a 7.5, which doesn't really close the gap at all. It's still a 0.6 damage per second margin between the Blowpipe and the Dragon Hunter Crossbow. Let's move on to the Brutal Reds. Next up on the list of the Brutal Dragons, we have the Brutal Red Dragons. And once again, Void setup is the best for the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, and the Armadillo setup is best for the Toxic Blowpipe. And as you can see, we have a 5.37 damage per second at the Brutal Reds with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, and a 4.7 damage per second with the Toxic Blowpipe. And then if we go ahead and drink a potion and start praying Rigor, we're going to have a 7.55 versus a 7.11. So once again, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is now best in slot for Brutal Red Dragons. And finally, for the Brutal Dragons, we have the Brutal Black Dragons. Now, as you can see, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow with the Void setup, which is the best in slot, has a 4.6 damage per second, and the Toxic Blowpipe setup, which is with the Armadillo setup, which is best in slot, has a 3.7. Now, this difference is absolutely fucking huge, guys. I know 1 damage per second doesn't seem like a lot, but that's almost a 35% increase in damage per second just by using the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, which is absolutely nuts. On top of that, if you are using a Ranging Potion and Rigor, as you can see, we have a 7.4 with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow and a 6.4 with the Toxic Blowpipe. Once again, absolutely insane margin there. That's around 18% difference in damage per second, which is huge. That being said, let's go ahead and get onto the big boy dragon, Vorkath. And lastly on the list, guys, if you'll ignore the very, very inefficient kill going on in the background, is Vorkath. Now, Vorkath or Vorkath, however you want to pronounce it, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is going to give you an 8.5 damage per second, as opposed to the Toxic Blowpipe's 8.2 damage per second if you're using both Void setups, and Void is the best in slot for both of these weapons. Now this is with a Ranging Potion and Rigor. I decided not to do a normal one because you shouldn't be fighting Vorkath without prayer and pots anyway. So Dragon Hunter Crossbow is 0.3 damage per second better than the Blowpipe. However, here's where things get a little bit juicy. Normally when you fight Vorkath, you want to lower its defense before you go in for the fight. So I did the math again. With one Dragon Warhammer spec, you're going to have a 9.1 damage per second against Vorkath with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, and you can have a 9.58 damage per second with the Blowpipe against Vorkath. Now, most of the time, you're going to try and land one Dragon Warhammer spec or BGS spec before you even go in for the kill, and the lower the monster's defense, the better the Blowpipe is going to be. The other argument you can make is, can you even Wooks Walk with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow? And as you'll see in the background, once again, please ignore the inefficiency of this. I'm not a very good PVMer. You can see that you are able to Wooks Walk Vorkath with the Dragon Hunter Crossbow. So, essentially, it goes like this. If you manage to land a Dragon Warhammer spec, the Blowpipe is better. If not, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is better at Vorkath. So there you have it, guys. The Dragon Hunter Crossbow is best in slot for a lot of dragons since it's buff. And basically, it just goes, the lower the dragon's defense, the better the Blowpipe is going to be. The higher the defense, the better the Dragon Hunter Crossbow is going to be. If you guys would like to check out Bitter Koji, I don't know how to say his name. If you'd like to check out his DPS calculator, I'll leave a link to it in the description. I'll also leave a link to his Twitter if you guys want to go check that out. So massive shout out to him for making this spreadsheet. It is absolutely awesome and I use it all of the time. But that being said, that is going to wrap up today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I will catch you in the next one tomorrow. Take it easy.